like I'd be curious to hear what initially inspired you to start thinking about these two figures in relation to each other.
Mhm. Um, well, interestingly enough, I didn't begin with the Homeric hymn to Hestia, which is where we see the two of these characters paired. Both the hymns to Hestia are relatively short, and it's the first hymn that mentions Hermes. But I didn't begin there. Where I began was when I first began teaching a course in what I've now called cyborg life, about 12, oh, yeah, 12 years ago, something like that. Um, I realized that Hermes is, of course, the tutelary divinity of the internet. I mean, that's a perfect way of describing him because he is the Greek god of communication. There's so much more to him, and which I'm sure we'll get into. Um, but then I realized that one of the challenges presented by our always on life is focus, is the ability to settle into, for my students, a dissertation topic, for my writing clients, the subject of a book or an article, or how to fashion their memoir, how to really settle into and dwell with one thing when we live a life of such intense and unceasing interruption. And that's when I got more curious about Hestia, who is a divinity of the hearth fire. She is the sacred fire in the home, not only in the abode of the gods, but also in human homes as well. So she is, in fact, she's not even imagined as a figure, like a human figure in the same way that Hermes is imagined as a young man. She actually is the hearth fire, the circle of stones, the flames at the center of the hearth. And so she is, if you will, a divinity of. mm, I was about to say she's not a divinity of movement, but that's actually not quite true. And I can talk about that a little bit more too. But she's very opposite Hermes, who's kind of always flying around. She is a goddess, a divinity who dwells and who centers herself on something. And so many of my students and writing clients need to find that embodied center for their creative work.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, she's such an interesting figure. And reading about her this week, there's not a lot of mythology about her, but apparently she was the most uh, honored
Mhm.
god because she was in every home. And so
Yes.
every domestic ritual started and centered around Hestia, which is really interesting, and also in the temples as well.
Yes.
You read accounts that Hestia was the first one invoked at the beginning of any ritual. It's like Hestia, then Zeus, then whatever other
Mhm.
divinity you're ritualizing around, and also the end, so pouring out libations to Hestia,
Yes.
which is really interesting, but not a lot of stories about her, other than that she's one of the offspring of Kronos, right?
Yes. Yes. She's one of the original Titans, as a matter of
Yeah.
fact. Yeah, both first and last. Um, but yeah, you're making an interesting point, which is we don't have narratives about Hestia, but we have the presence of Hestia. Um, and it's crucial. No gathering can begin, no gathering can conclude without invoking Hestia. And so she has this very important role in what I think of as a ritual, even if people don't, create consciously or intentionally create a ritual. She's still there at the beginning and the ending of a gathering.